As is becoming traditional, we always close off the conference, the VeloCon, every year by recapping what we were up to this year and just looking at, the kind of development in the tool and the different kinds of things. And it's just kind of a bit of a whirlwind tour of what happened in the last year, so we can, be a bit nostalgic and realize, what, where we, how far we've come this year. And so I'm going to go through and just give everyone a quick highlight of some of the features that I found really cool. Of course, there are many more, and we won't take too long talking about them. So let me just quickly share my screen. Yeah, this one. Can we see that? Yeah. Okay, cool. Can you guys see it? Yeah. All right, great.
Yes, looks good.
Cool. Okay, cool. So yeah, so this year, what happened? So the latest release is 0.070, which came out in the last couple of months, and we've had a lot of community engagement, stability, and bug fixes, and it's a lot faster this year than it was last year. So performance improvements around the around the tool. So one of the really cool things that we worked on this year was getting the NTFS parser to be much more solid and fuller feature, and that is really important for a number of forensic type analysis. One of the cool things was that now we handle hard links in the MFT. And a lot of people don't know this, and I guess, I probably didn't know about it either, that an MFT entry can actually contain multiple file name streams. I mean, people know about long name and short name, but you can actually have many more names. And the way that the MFT entries work is the file name stream actually contains a pointer to the parent MFT. So we can't really speak of an MFT having a parent, because it's not the MFT that has entry that has the parent. It's the actual file name that has the parent. So that means that because you can have lots of file names in an MFT entry, and each MFT entry can have a pointer to a different MFT entry that's the parent of that MFT entry, but it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be the same pointers. So they can go to different pointers. So what that means is that you can actually, when we are reconstructing the path names, we're going up and in multiple paths. And so we can actually end up with multiple full paths for one MFT entry. And we couldn't do that until this year. And so we did a big revamp of the NTFS parser and MFT parser so that we can do these things. And it turns out that these things are called hard link. So and they're actually quite common. So if you look at the MFT artifact, you'll notice, so it's actually a hidden field. So you'll have to look at it in the row response because it has underscore as the first character. So the GUI kind of hides it. But we are actually showing all the paths that linking to a file. So here we can see Notepad. And you can see how Notepad actually exists in multiple different places, but it's actually the same Notepad and it's the same MFT ID. It's not a copy, it's really just the same file. But we have to, so that means that if we are searching for files in different paths, we really need to consider all of these paths, not just, we used to just report the top one. And so, the more usual thing is to look at, the first one. And so, so that was kind of the, the old way, but it's still shown that way to remove confusion. But really, we are looking at all of those different hard links, right now. So that was pretty cool. The other cool thing that we managed to do this year was to implement encryption on the offline collector. As you know, the offline collector is used to collect artifacts into a zip file, and then we deliver the zip file through clouds or whatever number of other ways. But the problem is that the zip file could, contains potentially sensitive information. So it's kind of risky to just have it as unencrypted, because it could be compromised in transit as it's getting to you. So we used to have this zip file password, so we could encrypt a zip file with a password, but that is not good enough because the password has to be like in the embedded config file, so that because it's a symmetric password, right? So then the offline collector could store it with that password. So as of 067, we actually have asymmetric encryption in the offline collector. So and that works it's very easy to use, and so because it's such an improvement in security for the offline collector, and it's actually really easy to use, then I would recommend almost always using it. And so that actually ensures that the zip files are protected, and you really can't decrypt them except for if you have the private key, because it's an asymmetric encryption standard. And the way it works is very easy. You just turn on the encryption scheme here when you're creating the collector, and what that does is it uses the server's own certificate to basically create this collector. So it puts its own public key in the config file, and then when the offline collector collects the thing, it generates a random password and encrypts that password with the public key of the server, and then encrypts the rest of the zip file with that password. And so there's then you can't really get the password unless you have the private key on that server. So the server can decrypt it, but then nobody else can in transit. And so this is the most recommended way. It's really easy to use. Just turn it on and it works. And then when you collect the file, then you end up with basically metadata. So it looks like so you have a zip file, and then inside of that you have a metadata file, which is obviously unencrypted, but it has the encrypted password here, and then the public key of the server, and then the server can then verify the public key, and then it has the private key, and then can decrypt the password, and then the actual data is sitting inside another zip file inside the first zip file, sort of thing. So doing it this way means that the encrypted file is protected. It's actually a pretty cool feature. So dealing with these offline collectors, has really improved this year. And it turns out that because a lot of people use the offline collector, and it's a kind of a popular feature for Velociraptor, but it's actually useful not just for offline collection. So back in quite a long time ago now, about a year ago now, Eric Capuano has actually done a exercise in the OpenSOC DFIR challenge, and it was a really cool exercise. It had Velociraptor and it had some data, and back in that time we didn't really have any way of actually sharing that data. So it was in the server, right? But there was no way to easily export it, and in a way that that we can import it back. So it ended up being very difficult for him to share that with the community after the event, and sort of like take a backup of the server, right? So it became apparent that we need a way of actually being able to export and import collections. So we could always export the collections, but we used to basically just export them as a random zip file, and then rely on other tools to parse it in an ad hoc fashion. But we needed to have a standard format that we could use so that we can re-import it again. And so this is kind of the thing that prompted this feature, so that when people wanted to export data, they could easily export it in a way that can be imported back again. So now we have a very structured zip file with a structure in it, and all the metadata in it, like for example, what exactly was collected as part of this collection, and the logs and all this kind of stuff. So all of the information that we need to essentially reconstruct it is now stored in the collection, and then we can use that to import it again using the server util import collection. We can import it back into the server, so you can move collections from server to server, back them up, that kind of thing. And so we're using the same format, the same internal format for the offline collector, as well as for the exports. Like if you go in a collection and hit exports, that's producing the same kind of zip file, right? Cool. So that was really useful. That was a pretty huge feature, but you can't really talk about it that much. But client server protocol has been revamped, so we've got much faster client server. So we used to do a lot of work on the server in terms of just keeping stats and reassembling, like statistics of what the client was doing, and that slowed down the server and slow down the client. So what we've done now is moved a lot of that bookkeeping type work down to the client, so it does all its own stats and so on. And we just kind of on the server we just write it. So it changed the protocol and it made it a little bit faster. And so now we are a lot more scalable. So we used to say that it's one server for 10, 15,000 endpoints, and I think now it would be much higher than that because of this protocol change. The virtual file system was really bad. So because it was never really kind of like a core feature, and so we kind of had it there because it's kind of like it was a a layover from GRR, but but then people actually kind of like it and they like to use it. So this year we've really kind of invested in trying to make that virtual file system better. It used to be really slow, and because of the way that the data was stored, and so you couldn't really use it for very large directories. Like if you went to the Windows directory and try to like download that would usually kill the browser because it loaded the whole directory into the browser at once. And so if you had like a lot of files like in the Windows directory or Windows System 32, it just didn't work. So this new design means that we can use these page tables, so we can page the table, which we couldn't do before. And that means that we can have very large, oops, I think this one, yep. So if we can zoom in, we've got a very large number of files in this directory that we can manage, now, so there's no limit anymore. And it can be very fast. And because of this, we can actually do, like we can click this recursive download. I mean, you can actually do it for the whole disk, and it actually doesn't take like that long, maybe like 5 minutes or so. So you can actually refresh the entire disk, and which we couldn't do before because it wasn't as efficient. So now it's super fast. The other cool things that we invested in this year, the time to improve VQL and made it more stable. One of the problems that we had was that in VQL you can it's essentially a programming language, but you could do certain things that would be really bad, and it was very hard to kind of like explain to people like the differences between certain things and the kind of resourcing implications of those things. And so what we now are starting to do is more and more develop defenses in the language so that we don't fail in a catastrophic way when people do the wrong thing. So one of the examples is the materialize query. So here we have the materialize query, and so if you read the documentation, the difference between a let equals and a let less than equal is that a let equal just defines that as, it's like a function definition basically. It just defines it as a query and stores it into the variable. But when you're using this less than or equal sign, then it literally it's called the materialize operator. We're literally running that query and storing all of the data inside a variable called X, so as the data, as the raw data. And there's reasons for why we want to do it, certain, for performance and things like that. But see, this kind of query is difficult to judge, right? Because if the glob is not too bad, then it might be like 10 files, it's probably fine, right? It might be 100 files, it's still fine. But this glob could easily, match thousands of files, and then we're trying to stuff thousands of files into memory. So the point is, this kind of problem, this kind of language feature it's bad when you get it wrong, because then we used to have these issues where people would write a query and then the memory would just go out of control, right? And then and that's running on the endpoint, so it's actually really bad. But it's actually also difficult to determine how many files would match in the first place. So it was really important to make sure that this actually didn't explode, didn't increase its memory use like in an unbounded way. So now what we are doing is that we are storing it in memory to a point, and then at some point we switch to disk and we start writing on disk instead. And we do that transparently, so you don't really need to worry about it. So it's actually become safe to do this kind of operation, which was really, really bad before. Very dangerous. And the same thing in a globe, when we're in a group by. So when we're doing a group by, is we're trying to kind of difficult, because we can't predict how many groups there are. So now we also switch to disk-based algorithm, which is slower, but at least it's safer. So these kind of VQL improvements really help. The other really the other really helpful thing with VQL that a lot of people have been struggling with is trying to debug VQL, trying to understand what is going on exactly in this query, and why am I not seeing the columns that I think I should be seeing, or something like that. And so we actually had added an explain keyword, which allows, which is essentially it's like a trace of the query. As the query runs, it tells you what it's doing at every step of the way. And so in this case, you can see that it starts to explain this, and then it calls the clients plugin here. And then the clients plugin starts to send the first row, and then we can see all the data in the row and the types of all the columns, and then it's evaluating the where condition. And in this case, it's rejecting it because this expression rejects it. And if you look at the last seen at, and then, we've got, we've got the time, and that is what was called. So anyway, we can get a lot of information about why a row is rejected. And that's helpful to try and understand, what's happening in the query as you're writing it. Then we have a bunch of GUI improvements, trying to help. Oh, there were some questions, sorry. How many endpoints can Velociraptor handle with 070? So yeah, we recommend 10 to 15. We probably maybe 20 is the recommended thing, but people tell me that they're running about, the largest number was 60 to 80,000, but I think that's ridiculous. So I wouldn't go there, but maybe like 30,000 is probably fine. Also have a plan to improve multi-fronted server. Yes. Some data like user storage info on the homepage still not available. I'm not sure what you mean by users, but we can talk later. Okay, so we added some filtering in the UI. So now the filtering here, and what happens here is this is just filtering the UI. So it does like a temporary table. It creates a temporary table and uses that to do the paging. So basically we can easily, so it's sort of the same as the VQL, but in the notebook, but it can be done on any filter, on any table now. And then we have this built-in hex viewer, which is actually really kind of handy. So if we grab like, if we look at any of the files, so this is a file, oops, hang on, sorry. And then we have a preview, right? So this is our preview, and so we can actually search for things in the file itself. So like user, there should be something. So we can actually search forwards and backwards, And so it's actually really, this is a regular expression match, right? So we can actually search, for any match like that, or we can match, strings, hex strings, and just go to offsets. But this is really handy for just a quick overview to just see if you download a file, and all downloads now have this preview type thing, so we can quickly search for it. And in 070, we actually got a very fast client search index. So this is where we can search the clients here, and that's now done in a very fast way, and we have a much more efficient indexing here that works. That goes back to your question, Azim, especially on multi front end. It's actually a lot faster because we manage, we have much more compact storage. So we can actually report now the total matching clients because we have such a fast index, and we handle a lot more clients, and we have a page table, so we can actually page them, which before we couldn't page to the end. We couldn't go all the way to the end. So if you have, a lot of, let's switch to this one. Show all, then we actually can go to the end, and we can page to any of them, and this number we know how much. So the paging is much better than it was, so it's pretty cool. Okay, and then we talked about some security issues, security improvements. We had a number of security improvements. People were really concerned about, so we have this super powerful, Velociraptor, and it's really powerful, and we can do all these hunting, and that's great, right? But what happens if, one of my Velociraptor admins falls for a phishing scam or something like that, and then their account gets compromised, and their password is compromised or whatever, and then the attacker gets access to the console, right? And that is actually a really serious concern, right? Because it is a powerful tool, and then you have, someone could gain access to the console by, compromising credentials or whatever. And so, a lot of people were doing things like they didn't want to have it deployed, but they did want to have it deployed. So they wanted to have it deployed, but it was down, it was turned off until they wanted to have it, until an incident happened, then they will turn it on. And it's very cumbersome to work with it. So now we have this thing called lockdown mode. And lockdown mode is super easy. You just it's a config file option. You just turn it on, and then the server is in lockdown. And that means that it cannot actually be, it cannot issue any new collections. It cannot do any new hunts. It cannot do anything, but it can read the old data. And if there's existing hunts, it can still read it, but you just can't, start new hunts without, removing that config option. So it's a little bit harder. So it's another layer of security there. So in an incident, you can turn that down and go into full active mode. But otherwise you can just have it in lockdown. And then the next level up this is more useful for people who have like a shared Velociraptor server with a lot of other users that are not necessarily trusted. And so, of course, because you realize that if you're running plugins, in the server context, so in server notebook, then they have full access to the server. So we can exec-v anything, we can read files. So in the normal deployment scenario, because you might need to do that, you might need to run another tool to do some post-processing or something like that, right? But it's that kind of trade-off sometimes, depending on the environment, is not always possible. So it's possible now to create an allow listing on the in the config file, and that literally prevents certain plugins from even loading. So Velociraptor can't do them anymore. And so that is a way of locking down the server. We can also do IP filtering now on the UI. So when we use Let's Encrypt, and there's only one SSL certificate, then previously we had to have the front end and the GUI sharing the same port, so we couldn't really filter the GUI but allow the front end to connect to clients, right? So so now you can actually apply an IP filter in policy in the config file to the GUI, so that you actually can't log into the GUI from certain IP addresses. You have to be in certain IP address to be able to log on to the GUI. So that helps as well. Cool. And we have a bunch of new accessors: SMB accessor, Azure, support Azure, S3 accessor. That is actually really cool. S3 accessor allows reading and uploading to S3 buckets. And so that actually works really well with the offline collector, especially when the offline collector is configured to upload to an S3 bucket, because then you can fully automate this thing where you could basically on the server just watch the S3 bucket, and then when a new collection appears, then you can immediately import it and post-process it, and add it to the hunt, and it becomes part of, so then it becomes like super automated. All right, so that was all, like a lot of the technical. Are we adding RBAC-based permission on type of artifacts such as service and admin artifact can only be accessed by admin? So that is already there. We already have the ability to say in an artifact, you have to have this permission to run this artifact. That's already there. So if you have a particular artifact that says, I need to be able to run a binary, or like, so some of the artifacts, for example, like allow you to run arbitrary commands, right? And that is obviously quite a sensitive thing. So we say you require execv permission, so you require the ability to run arbitrary commands, basically. So we already have that. So without so that was the technical side of it. But without the community, I don't think we would be here where we are. So I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the Velociraptor community this year and what happened, with us. So one of the things that we wanted to do this year, which was a bit different, was that we wanted to know who our user base was, because it was important to try and understand, where should we develop our invest all our efforts, what kind of features are important to the user base, and like people, it's an open source project, so people are very nice, and they always say, oh, well, thank you, but sometimes you develop something that people don't necessarily like or don't necessarily find useful, but instead of people just saying, no, that's obviously that's people are too polite to generally say, like, no, that's not useful, right? But we wanted to get to kind of prompt that feedback, and so we actually had here we've got a Velociraptor community survey, and you can read the report of that here, which I would encourage you to try and we try to get some questions to understand our user base and understand what people need. And it actually proved to be super useful. So we'll do it again next year, because we managed to get quite a lot of ideas about features that people found useful. And we wanted to know whether, who our users were in terms of size. Were we mostly small size or large size? And it turns out that there's actually a big mix. A lot of small companies, but also a lot of very large companies use Velociraptor, and people use it for a number of different focused areas, but I would say almost like evenly. So we're going to continue developing on those things. They're not kind of a waste of time. People do like it, and deployment size varies a lot. Most of the people have small number of deployments. But there's a few people that have extremely huge number of deployments, in the 100,000 range. But like most of the people are sitting at about the 5,000 endpoint range. So this is important for us to work out how much effort we should invest in really large scale, because that's an engineering challenge, obviously. All right. So, and the other cool thing that I thought was really, really sweet was that we got a lot of testimonials and product feedback, which was really cool. And yeah, so it sounds like the community is is happy and coming together. So that's really good. Looking into the future, where are we headed with Velociraptor? And so everybody has their own kind of use case, which is great. But I actually think that we could look at Velociraptor more as a platform, and there's some interesting things that we could do with Velociraptor being installed widely. We can do all kinds of interesting things and treat the VQL almost as a platform. So when you think about it, if we have Velociraptor installed everywhere, what could we do? Now we start to do have a lot more possibilities. For instance, we can ask the endpoint about as Wes was talking about before, about auditing, right? Configuration changes. So even inventory management, all of these things are now possible because we have VQL, which is super flexible, and when we can write specific queries of the endpoints, and it's already installed, right? So we've got a lot of interest in doing these little experiments, like the audit framework that Wes was talking about, trying to understand, how could we leverage that to to go into sort of similar but different areas like compliance management or patch management or something like that, right? The other cool thing that we started to see more and more is other projects that are building up on VQL, and that goes towards the theme that we talked about with Velociraptor as a platform. So we've already talked about Matt's Detectoraptor, which is a perfect example of another project that is generating that VQL, automating all of the VQL side of it, and then it actually builds on top of Velociraptor as a platform. And another example is the SQLite hand artifact, which also was developed this year. And basically, it was kind of inspired by SQL eCMD, which is a popular SQLite analysis tool, and it was kind of inspired by that because that is a fairly automated tool with a lot of these specialized, descriptive YAML files that kind of deal with different types of SQLite, like Chrome history and Firefox history and things like that. And so building on that kind of idea, we have the SQLite artifact, SQLite Hunter, which is here in this repository, which again basically ends up with like a lot of these very automated parsers that just look for Chrome history, so like in this case, when we're talking about let's just switch orgs. So in this one, we can just collect it, so it becomes very easy. You just select the SQLite Hunter, right, and then we just go. So we don't even need to tune it or whatever, and it basically just goes for and it just everything that looks like a SQL. So it has all the targets, right, and it just goes and fetches them. So you basically so it's not just web browsers as well. Like we've got other things like activities cache, the Windows EDB, which we saw talk about today as well. So that was cool. And then you basically end up with like all these sources, and we talked about that before, right? And we talked about the the Windows thing before, right? The search index, which is pretty cool, right? So you can see that the search index is not really SQLite, it's ESE. So it's so it's kind of like we had a bit of a scope creep, but it's become sort of like a one size fits all super automated artifact that is becoming much. It's becoming much more usable than just going and collecting 100 different types of smaller artifacts. So anyway, just to summarize, we've done a lot this year, but really to move forward, we really need you, the community, to help us out by asking for features, asking for ideas, brainstorming ideas like, oh, I would really love to have something that does whatever. And we are a very welcoming and open community. We're on Discord and GitHub, and don't be afraid to jump in and have a chat, and have suggestions. These are actually really important, even more so than writing code. If you just have a great suggestion, this is like a great contribution to our project. So so anyway, thanks for attending the VeloCon. I mean, this is the last talk we've wrapped up, and it was a really excellent event again this year. It was really cool. The great set of talks, and yeah. So these are all the. If you haven't played with Velociraptor yet, I mean, what are you waiting for, right? Yeah. So yeah. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mike. I want to echo your sentiments there. This is a great conference. If you don't mind giving me the share permissions back.
Sorry. Yep. Stop.
Just have
there we go.
few more slides to wrap us up here.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so excuse me, you already did what I was going to do, which is
there you go.
kind of reshare some of the resources here. So we have our website, our main website, which has all of our documentation. We actually refer to it as our documentation site, docs.velociraptor.app. Really, that's kind of like the starting point for anything that you need to find, right? We've got all the other links on there as well, links to our Discord server, links to all our social media. We have our blog on there, our Velociraptor blog, where any new news or stuff like that is posted there pretty immediately. GitHub is the repository for Velociraptor. So if you actually want to give Velociraptor a spin, that's where you'd go to download it. You can download any other artifacts there as well. We also have some documentation and discussion forums there outside of what we have on the main site. And then our social media links, our two social media platforms are Twitter/X and LinkedIn. It's really the best place to keep up to date on all of the news and happenings on Velociraptor. Really, if anything happens, we usually get that out there on Twitter and LinkedIn pretty quickly. So be sure to add us on there. It's also a great way, LinkedIn primarily, also a great way to interact and network with other Velociraptor users. I've met a ton of great people via LinkedIn. A couple of people have reached out to me just today during this conference, and I appreciate the invite. So and everyone here is welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn as well. Our Discord server, as we mentioned, is the same as our website, just /Discord at the end there. And then YouTube, this whole presentation will be, or this conference, will be on YouTube. It'll be replayed on there. A few people have asked me, how long will it take before the replay is available after the live stream ends? That's really up to YouTube. This is a pretty hefty, lengthy video, so it's probably going to take a while for YouTube to do all the post processing. I think last year it took us like a good 12 hours, like a half a day before the replay was up there, maybe less, but it will take a little bit for it to process. Excuse me. Once again, please get the we're going to get the survey out at the conclusion of this presentation. A few people have asked me if we're going to announce the presentation of the conference today. It's not going to be today. I want to give people a chance to actually fill out the survey when we set it out. Excuse me. Yeah, so we'll get that survey out probably within a day or two of the conference ending. Want to make sure everyone has time to give us their candid thoughts, and then in that survey we'll have one of the questions will be who you thought the presentation of the conference was. We'll tally up those votes and then we'll make an announcement. If not by the end of this week, sometime next week. Okay. I just want to throw out a couple more words of thanks out to various people out there. I want to thank the IT and event staff here at Rapid7 again for all their help in helping to logistically stage this event. It took a lot of coordination with them to make this happen. It went pretty smoothly, I would say. We didn't have any real hiccups with the technology this year, which was great. I want to thank the executive team at Rapid7 as well for helping to sponsor this event. Our incredible panel of speakers, they absolutely knocked it out of the park this year. I want to thank them all by name. Matt Green, Simonor Gunyesu, Falgun Kulkarni, Julia Paluk, Andreas Flamino, Wes Lambert, Kostya Ilukovic, and of course, Mike Cohen, for all of the wonderful presentations. I know I learned a lot today. I hope everyone who attended learned a lot as well. And then finally, most importantly, I want to thank you, the community. Without you guys, this would not be possible. It has been my distinct honor and privilege to host this conference last year as well as this year. It's just been a pleasure. I've met so many great people through the course of this job, and I look forward to meeting a lot of you guys as well. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me on any of the channels, Discord, LinkedIn, anywhere. Twitter as well. I love meeting you guys and kind of finding out how our community is taking Velociraptor to the next level. I really can't wait to see what the future lies, and I'm sure you guys can either. So thank you again for everyone for joining. We had a great crowd, some great questions, very lively, very interactive and engaging, and I want to thank you guys all again for making this a great event. Once again, my name is Carlos Canto. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you so much, Carlos.